He said it like a joke, but no one laughed. "You'll survive not having Belgian waffles for once?" Colin sneered into the mic, smug as a toddler who just figured out how to spell efficiency. We were all on the call. Regional leads, operations staff, finance, but only one face froze the way Ethan's did. Just for a second. He didn't blink, didn't argue, didn't even unmute. He just gave a short nod, typed something, and minimized the screen. I watched it happen. Everyone did. That was the first time I realized Ethan was going to let this man burn in his own confidence. Colin had been in the role for 3 weeks. Director of Strategy, which apparently now meant random axe swinger with Wi-Fi. He came in from a failed fintech startup that collapsed after burning investor cash on crypto vending machines. But that didn't stop our CEO from calling him a necessary disruptor. So here he was, leading an all-hands Zoom while sipping a neon drink from a branded shaker bottle, slicing through every travel budget like he was Gordon Ramsay holding a machete. "This is about focus," he said, pacing in front of a forward wall in what I swear was a WeWork. "We're trimming fat, streamlining spend. No more freeloading on the company dime. If you can't do it on Zoom, you probably shouldn't be doing it." He had that startup-y tone, half TED Talk, half sugar crash. I muted my mic and took a sip of cold coffee. The call chat was dead silent. Then he said it. "Ethan, that Brussels thing next month? That's done. No more luxury trips on my watch." He grinned like he just uncovered fraud. I actually flinched. See, I've worked next to Ethan for 6 years. And that trip isn't a vacation. It's the one thing holding together our European operations license. A diplomatic ballet of handshakes, ink signatures, and compliance rituals that literally cannot happen over email. But Colin wouldn't know that. Wouldn't care either. Ethan could have said something. He could have warned him. But instead, he just unmuted, said one word, "Sure," and muted again. That's when I knew something was off. Ethan doesn't sure things unless he's got a folder already open. Hey, quick thing before we go on. If you're watching and getting into this, don't forget to tap that subscribe button and like the video. 97% of viewers never do, and it really helps keep stories like this coming. Thanks for supporting the team. Anyway, the call ended with Colin patting himself on the back, HR typing up policy updates in real time, and Ethan already halfway through drafting whatever storm he saw on the horizon. A lot of people left that call thinking the fat had been trimmed. I left it wondering how long before the roof came down on Colin's perfect haircut. It was 8:14 a.m. when Ethan sent the email. I remember because I saw the subject line pop into our shared inbox. Plain as paper. Brussels travel? Cancelled per directive. No exclamation points, no pushback, just his usual clipped formality and that one haunting sentence at the bottom. Note: EU license renewal requires in-person signature by October 1st. I stared at it for a long minute. That line wasn't for us. It was a receipt. No one replied. 10 minutes later, Colin forwarded it to finance with a thumbs-up emoji and the caption, "Efficiency in action flexed biceps." Then he added, "Let's reallocate those funds. Use it to boost Q4 marketing." I swear to God, the man had the emotional intelligence of a parking meter. I watched Ethan walk past my desk not long after. No drama, no muttering, just that same old mug in his hand and a clipboard under his arm like it was just another Tuesday. But something about the way he moved, methodical, precise, like he was mentally taking inventory, put a pit in my stomach. It reminded me of how my dad used to check the power box before a storm hit. You didn't know when the power would go out, but you damn well knew it was coming. Later that afternoon, a junior assistant, bless her 22-year-old soul, poked her head into Colin's office and asked, "Hey, does canceling that trip affect any paperwork or compliance stuff?" She was trying to be helpful. Colin barely looked up from his screen. "Licenses are digital now. Don't worry about it," he said, chewing on some protein bar like it owed him money. "It's 2025, not 1992. I saw Ethan hear that. His back was turned, but I swear his shoulder twitched. That night, I went back to that email. I reread it 3 times, then looked up the compliance calendar in our shared drive. There it was, buried in an old SOP doc dated back to 2017. License renewals for European Union operations must be conducted in person by designated compliance officer. Remote signatures not accepted. Deadline: October 1st, 11:59 p.m. Central European Time. The file had Ethan's initials on the revision note. I should have said something. I should have sent a message. But I think part of me wanted to see how far Colin would push it. See, men like Colin don't believe in consequences until they're drowning in them. And Ethan? He doesn't believe in saving people from their own arrogance. The next morning, Ethan printed the email chain and filed a hard copy in his locked drawer. Then he opened a clean spreadsheet titled Compliance, Timeline, Directive Deviation Log. I know because I watched him do it. Quiet as ever, like setting up flood barriers on a sunny day. He never raised his voice, never made a scene, just built his paper trail brick by brick, while the rest of us kept smiling in meetings and pretending the tide wasn't rising. Something was coming. We just didn't know how high the water would get. Yet, October 1st slipped by like any other dull Thursday. Drizzly, beige, uneventful on the surface. Nobody said a word about Brussels. No calendar pings, no frantic Teams messages, not even a reminder from legal. Ethan didn't mention it either. He just sat at his desk like he always did, screens open, posture straight, responding to audit inquiries and clearing backlog tickets like he wasn't sitting on top of a silent countdown. Colin, meanwhile, was in full peacock mode. HR had just dropped an internal newsletter praising him for innovative fiscal leadership and identifying efficiency gaps in outdated operational processes. They meant Ethan's trip. They meant the waffles joke. One of the execs even clapped him on the back in the break room that morning and said, "Love what you're doing with the budget." Brussels was always a head-scratcher. Colin beamed like he'd just cured cancer with a Google Sheets template. I caught Ethan looking at them as he stirred his coffee. Not angry, just aware. There's something bone-deep unsettling about a man who doesn't flinch when you insult him. Like watching someone pet a dog that's been trained to bite. Around 2 p.m., he clicked open a browser tab, logged into the EU compliance portal, and stared at the screen for a moment. I saw the corner of his mouth twitch, barely. Then he hit refresh. Again. And again. The screen flashed red. Account access denied. Certification renewal expired. He didn't call IT. He didn't forward it to legal. He just screen capped it, saved the image to a neatly labeled folder on his desktop, EU license chain. Then closed the window like he was done checking the weather. That folder? He backed it up to a thumb drive. Then to his encrypted cloud. Then he printed it. 3 copies. I saw the labels. One for legal, one for compliance, and one marked with his own name in block letters. He wasn't panicking. He was preparing. Like a man making sandwiches before a hurricane hits. At 4:17 p.m., Colin came swaggering past Ethan's desk, Bluetooth earpiece in, laughing about something with marketing. "Next year will be fully virtual anyway," he said to no one in particular. "I mean, what even is a paper signature anymore?" Ethan looked up, nodded once, and said, "Time will tell. That night I stayed late. Something told me to." Ethan was still there too, head down, not working, just waiting, watching the storm clouds stack in the distance. The eerie calm before the sirens start wailing. No alarms went off. No lights flickered. But something had shifted. The deadline was gone. The protocol broken. And no one noticed except the man they thought didn't matter. And once the countdown ends, you don't get to press undo. You just wait for the fallout. The sound of heels sprinting down the hallway cut through the usual Friday morning calm like a bone saw through silence. We were 2 minutes into the boardroom's weekly strategy meeting when Marissa, the executive assistant who's never once raised her voice, flung the door open, breathless, red envelope in hand. No one spoke as she crossed the room and placed the envelope squarely in front of the CEO like it was a bomb. It was thick, certified, stamped across the front in bold, all caps. Urgent legal, non-compliance. The CEO, Mark Jensen, silver hair, reputation for calm under pressure, went completely still. The kind of stillness you only see in surgeons before the first incision or gamblers holding a losing hand. He slid his thumb under the flap, opened it with a deliberate slowness that made my skin itch, and unfolded the paper inside. He scanned the page. Once, twice. His mouth moved but no sound came out. Then he read, voice cracking halfway through. License expired. Daily non-compliance penalties active as of 0:01 today. 100,000 euros per day. Time stopped. The room, just seconds ago filled with PowerPoint chatter and performance updates, turned into a vacuum. I watched as one of the VPs put down his latte like it suddenly weighed 10 pounds. Legal blinked 3 times, mouth slightly open. Finance paled. Colin, seated across from me, had the smile of someone trying to figure out if they just misheard the words 100,000 euros. Mark looked up. What the hell is this? Nobody answered. Marissa whispered. It was couriered by hand. They said it couldn't be emailed. The irony. Colin finally found his voice. That can't be right. That has to be some kind of error. He chuckled, trying to laugh it off like someone just exaggerated a bad Yelp review. I mean, we're still in good standing, right? Legal was already flipping through their binder, face draining as she muttered. The Brussels renewal? The in-person component. That's when Ethan quietly pushed back his chair. Not a word. No theatrics. He just stood, slid a slim folder from his bag, and placed it gently on the table like a priest laying down a Bible. I recognized it. The folder he started building the day the cancellation went through. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Colin kept stammering. It's digital now, right? Everything's digital now. We don't need to fly out there for a stamp. That's just bureaucracy. Legal looked up, ghost pale. No, not for this. It's an EU compliance clause, specific to our operating certification. They require physical, in-person verification annually. It's non-negotiable. Ethan's always handled it. All eyes swiveled to Ethan. He simply nodded once. That nod said everything. I was ready. You weren't. The CEO rubbed his forehead, then locked eyes with Colin. Was this cancelled? Colin opened his mouth. Ethan opened the folder. Inside was the email, time-stamped, archived, forwarded, printed. One sentence underlined. Trip to Brussels cancelled per directive. Note. EU license renewal requires in-person signature by October 1st. Colin looked like he'd swallowed his own tie. No words. Just the growing, horrified realization that this wasn't just a mistake. It was documented failure. And the clock had started ticking. 100,000 euros. Per day. Starting now. Colin's voice cracked first. There must be a system error, he said, louder than necessary, like volume could outrun accountability. Someone must have dropped a task or missed a calendar alert. Who was supposed to handle this? He looked around the room like he was searching for a ghost he could hang. No one moved. No one volunteered. And then, as if choreographed by God himself, every pair of eyes slowly drifted in the same direction. Toward Ethan. Ethan, who hadn't raised his voice once. Ethan, who'd been called legacy fluff 2 weeks ago. Ethan, who had just finished sipping from his coffee mug and calmly set it down like we weren't all watching a financial guillotine drop in real time. He didn't blink, didn't gloat, just reached into his folder, pulled out a neatly paper-clipped packet, and slid it down the polished boardroom table with the kind of quiet finality normally reserved for divorce decrees and last wills. Mark picked it up. Legal leaned in. On top was the original email Ethan had sent. The one no one replied to. The one that read, Trip to Brussels cancelled per directive. Note, EU license renewal requires in-person signature by October 1st. Beneath it, a printed chain of internal forwards, complete with timestamps. Colin's response to finance. Thumbs up emoji. And at the bottom, highlighted in yellow, a clause pulled directly from the internal compliance manual. Annual EU operating license renewal must be completed in person by a designated compliance officer. Remote verification is not permitted under EU Statute 48b. 2. Failure to comply will result in immediate suspension of license and per diem penalties. Colin turned the color of skim milk left in the sun. Well, I didn't see that. No one explained it. Why wasn't I told this needed to be in person? Legal cleared her throat like she didn't want to be here. You were told. It's in the directive, Ethan included. And it's been standing policy since 2017. Mark's face hardened. So this trip wasn't a luxury? Was it? Ethan shook his head once. It was a legal requirement. I documented the cancellation per instruction. I flagged the risk. I was told not to worry. Colin stood up suddenly, hands flailing. I mean, come on. This isn't my fault. There should have been a system warning, an automated alert. Why are we still doing things manually? Why wasn't there a backup? Because the manual thing was the backup, Ethan replied, still seated. The process exists for a reason. You removed the only component that ensured compliance. The room was dead quiet. No one was looking at Colin anymore. They were watching Ethan. Really watching him. Not the background guy. Not the quiet lifer. But the man who, for the first time in years, held every piece of proof while the golden boy stood choking on buzzwords. Mark spoke last. Is this salvageable? Legal hesitated. Only if someone flies out immediately, and even then we're already liable for penalties. Colin tried to interject again, but Mark raised a hand. Slow, deliberate, shutting him up without a word. And in that moment it was clear who really held the power in the room. Not the loudest man, just the one with the receipts. The fire alarms weren't ringing, but it might as well have been a 4-alarm blaze. Within an hour of the boardroom blow-up, every hallway turned into a frantic whisper tunnel. Legal ducking into HR, finance slamming doors, PR huddled in the corner trying to script a strategic compliance delay that wouldn't send our stock price into cardiac arrest. Phones didn't stop. Neither did the quiet dread thickening in the air like smoke from a fire no one could find the extinguisher for. And through it all, Ethan, moving like a surgeon, precise, methodical, unfazed. I passed his desk around noon. He was on his third back-to-back Zoom, still in that same calm, monotone rhythm. Yes, I flagged it in the cancellation thread. No, the directive was not verbal. It's documented. Correct. The EU portal account has been inaccessible since October 1st at 12:03 a.m. I have logs if needed. His tone never wavered, like he was walking them through a math equation, not a €1 million hemorrhage. By 1 p.m., the CEO called an all-leads meeting. Closed door. High priority. Ethan was asked to join, personally invited, mind you, not CC'd like usual. He walked in carrying 2 folders. One labeled Original Protocol, the other Directive Chain Colin F. I don't know what was in them, but when the door opened 45 minutes later, our VP of Risk looked like he'd seen his own obituary. Then came the email. From the CEO. Subject: Immediate internal review, EU license failure. An internal audit was now underway. Every directive, every cancelled trip, every forwarded thread going under a microscope. Names would be attached. Responsibility traced. And guess who decided to grow a spine only after the barn had burned? Colin. I caught him later cornering Mark outside the CEO's office. Voice full of righteous panic. Ethan's been handling this for years. How was I supposed to know the specifics? It's not like he made the process clear. He was sweating, literal beads forming on his temples like a politician caught with a burner phone. He should have escalated. He should have explained it more thoroughly. That's when Mark handed him a printed timeline. I wasn't close enough to read it, but I was close enough to see the highlighter marks and the bright red timestamps. One line stood out, even from my distance. Note: EU license renewal requires in-person signature by October 1st. Colin went quiet, then muttered something about context and ambiguous wording. Mark didn't respond, just turned and walked away. Later, I found Ethan alone in the kitchen, refilling his mug. I said, "They're starting to realize, huh?" He didn't smile, didn't even look smug, just stirred his coffee and said, "They're realizing too late." And that's when it hit me. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't some master plan to take Colin down. Ethan had tried, warned, documented, and when none of it mattered, he didn't shout. He didn't fight. He just stepped back. and let gravity do its thing. They say numbers don't lie, but that morning in the boardroom, they damn near screamed. The CFO stood at the head of the table, tie slightly loosened, knuckles white around the edge of the podium. He wasn't one for dramatics, but even he couldn't disguise the tremble in his voice as he clicked to slide 4 of the deck, projected financial exposure. EU license lapse. If we don't rectify this by end of business Friday, he said, staring directly at Colin, we're looking at an estimated 1.2 million euros in penalties. He let the words sit. No spinning, no filters, just hard math bleeding into every corner of the room. Colin had the gall to scoff. That seems inflated. I mean, what are they actually going to do? Fine us into the Stone Age over a signature. Legal, sitting 2 chairs down, snapped. They already are. It's not hypothetical anymore, Colin. It's active. Every hour we delay is 4,166 euros. That's not metaphor. That's a meter running, and we're not even in the cab. Then came the kicker. The CFO tapped the next slide. Also, our largest European client, Bergman Logistics, just sent notice this morning. They're putting their $14 million contract on indefinite hold. Quote, until operational licensing is confirmed and valid for Q4 service agreements. The silence that followed could have flattened a forest. Colin opened his mouth to say something, probably to deny, deflect, or throw out another one of his paper-thin startup analogies. But before he could, someone from our European compliance liaison team piped up on the speaker call. Her accent was crisp, her tone lethal. We warned you, repeatedly. This isn't bureaucracy, it's law. You've been in breach since October 1st. The EU doesn't care about your internal reshuffles or who told who what. Either the paperwork is filed by a verified signatory, or the penalties continue. Then she added, sharp as a knife. This was protocol, not preference. All heads turned, not to Colin, not to legal, but to Ethan. He sat at the far end of the table, arms folded, face unreadable. You could see it finally sinking in, the realization washing over everyone at once. He'd been right, this entire time. And then he spoke, not loud, not angry, just even. I flagged it, once. For words. They hit harder than the CFO's entire presentation. Because they weren't just words, they were a mirror, reflecting everything this company had ignored, bulldozed, or buried under buzzwords and cost-cutting nonsense. Colin finally slumped back in his chair. The color had drained from his face entirely. He looked like a man who'd just realized the parachute he packed was a duffel bag. By the end of the meeting, finance was already cutting emergency wires. Legal was dialing Brussels. PR had drafted 3 versions of a damage control statement, none of which made it past review. And somewhere in the background, IT was being asked to lock down all Colin's access just in case. The numbers didn't just prove Ethan right. They proved Colin unfit. And in this business, that kind of exposure doesn't wash off. By mid-afternoon, the chaos had curdled into something colder, controlled desperation. The panic was still there, humming beneath every Slack ping and hallway conversation, but now it had direction, target, a last chance, and everyone knew exactly where that chance sat. Ethan. Around 3:40 p.m., the CEO himself, Mark, stepped out of his office and walked straight to Ethan's desk. No assistant, no email, just the man in person like a pilgrim approaching a shrine he once scoffed at. You could have heard a paperclip drop as Mark said, quietly, "Can we talk?" They went into the side conference room. Frosted glass, thin walls. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but in that room, whispers carried like sermons. We need you to fly to Brussels. Tonight, if possible. A pause. Can you fix this? Another pause. Longer. Then Ethan's voice, calm as ever. I can. But I need protection. I don't think Mark expected that. His voice tightened. From what? Ethan didn't raise his tone. From being blamed for what I documented against. I want a memo signed, clearing me of all liability related to the license lapse. I want legal to co-sign, and I want it time-stamped. Silence again. Then, done. 15 minutes later, I saw legal hand Ethan a signed sheet of company letterhead with 2 signatures at the bottom and a company seal. He read it over once, folded it neatly, and placed it in his travel binder. Not his bag, his binder. The one he only ever used for Brussels. An hour after that, an all-staff email went out. Subject line, Leadership Update. Buried in 2 paragraphs of corporate fluff was the line, effective immediately, Director Colin F. will be taking a personal leave of absence to focus on family matters and personal development. Translation. The man was benched. Quietly, neatly, like an embarrassing typo scrubbed from a press release. By 7:10 p.m., Ethan was in a rideshare on the way to the airport, carry-on in hand, itinerary already printed, compliance files prepped. Not a single person said goodbye in person. Not because they didn't want to, but because no one knew how. What do you say to the guy you ignored for years, now walking toward the fire you lit and expected someone else to put out? He touched down in Brussels the next morning, signed the paperwork by noon, took the standard EU compliance photo holding the renewed license. Gray background, stiff posture, time-stamped. The fines stopped accruing immediately. Final tally? For 100,000 euros. A bruise but not a bullet hole. He emailed the scanned documents to legal, CC'd the CEO, attached the signed memo clearing himself of all blame. Then he closed his laptop and walked to a small cafe near the old city square. Had coffee alone. No victory lap. No gloating LinkedIn post. Just a quiet man, doing the job that should have been respected in the first place. That night, back at the office, I saw his calendar update. Back in office Monday. License reinstated. All files archived. No emojis. No sarcasm. Just the clean, clinical end of a mess someone else created. And somehow, that silence spoke louder than anything Colin had ever shouted. Monday morning didn't come with fireworks or announcements. Just the usual gray hallway hum, the faint buzz of overhead fluorescence, and the sharp absence of one voice that used to fill every corridor with empty confidence. Colin's desk was cleared, his nameplate gone. No goodbye bagels. No farewell card passed around. Just a chair that no one dared sit in, like it still echoed with the sound of his last, panicked excuses. At 9:02 a.m., the boardroom filled. Ethan walked in last, same calm stride, same travel binder tucked under his arm. The CEO, who hadn't looked quite the same since Friday's audit spiral, stood at the head of the table, holding a single sheet of paper. No speech, no drama, just the facts. This, he said, unfolding it, is Colin Fletcher's formal resignation letter. He placed it gently on the table, face up. No one clapped. No one spoke. He continued, voice lower now. Some roles may look like overhead, until the roof collapses. Ethan, your work didn't just correct a mistake. It prevented a catastrophe. Then he offered it. A shiny new title, directorship, more pay, more control. A fast track to the seat Colin had so thoroughly disgraced. Ethan didn't even glance at it. Instead, he opened his binder and slid across a slim, stapled document. Proposal, he said. Mandatory director training. Compliance dependencies. Annual refreshers. I'm happy to run it. Mark blinked. You're declining the role? I'm declining the cycle, Ethan replied, not interested in repeating it from a higher floor. A murmur went around the table. No one argued. No one dared. He stood, nodded once to the room, and left the way he came, quietly, fully, with the kind of dignity you can't fake when things go sideways. Back at his desk, he unpacked his bag, logged into the system, re-archived the Brussels folder, relocked the physical copy in his drawer, and poured himself a cup of coffee like it was any other Monday. I passed by a few minutes later, just as he was checking his phone. He paused mid-sip, tilted the screen toward me. The headline read, Director ousted over 100,000 euros per day penalty debacle. Under it, a subhead, New compliance training underway to prevent future oversight. He smiled faintly. No satisfaction. No gloating. Just a man who watched the house catch fire, pointed once at the flames, then built a better blueprint while the rest of us fanned the smoke. He closed the tab. And the rest of us? We finally realized the quiet ones never needed to raise their voices. They were already the warning.